it's best, as Alice said, to begin at the beginning.
Yes. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the next episode of A View from the Easel for the Art Gallery of Northumberland. Gary, thank you so much for allowing us into your home.
No, I'm glad you could come.
There's so much we can talk about.
A great deal.
And let's start way back. Let's talk about your history in terms of your family, where you come from.
Really? You want to go that far
Yes,
back?
I do. I really want to know because I know that we share some ancestral roots.
Well, we both have a Greek heritage.
That's right.
That's true. Although my father, unlike your father, I think my father was ashamed of being Greek, and he changed his name from a lovely Greek name, Moskos, to Moore. So I grew up as Gary James Moore. It wasn't until he left. I mean, it's uncharacteristic, I think, of a Greek father to leave his family, but he left, and my mother, 5 years later, married again. The man she married adopted me, and his name was Dault. So I was Gary James Moore. I became Gary Michael Dault because my stepfather didn't want James to have any part in this, and he wanted to give me a nice Roman Catholic middle name, so he chose Michael. So, it was funny because when I don't know how people knew, I don't know how the kids knew, but when I was in school, in grade 1, people you were getting confused about what to call me, and I don't know why there was any confusion. I thought I was legally changed and the world changed and I was Gary Michael Dault forever, but some people persisted in thinking I was Gary Moore. Strange thing. Anyway, that was kind of a disruptive and confusing for a while.
Was it Toronto that you grew up in, or was it?
No, I grew up in Kingston, actually, not far from here. Kingston, actually, to which my wife and I often returned, before we lived here. We went to Kingston often from Toronto because I felt at home in Kingston. It was the place I've lived the longest, and I still feel warm and fuzzy about Kingston, actually.
What would you consider your first artistic expression to be? Was it drawing or was it writing?
When I was 12 years old, my grandfather, who was really the only man who raised me, thank God.
This is on your mom's side or your dad's
my
side?
My mom's side, yeah. The straight, pure Anglo-Saxon English side. He was a wonderful man, and I owe a great deal to him. I mean, I would have had all the potential phobias and problems of a fatherless boy or something without him. He was my father, really. He took me to an evening of puppetry at the local collegiate. I wasn't yet in high school. I'd be there next year. Wonderful puppet show produced by an Englishman named George Merton. And George Merton announced after the show that he was beginning a course the next day at Queen's for 2 months, the length of the summer. And this course was primarily for public school teachers. And my grandfather went up with me in tow to see Mr. Merton on the stage after people were leaving, asked if I might be possibly allowed into this course. And Mr. George Merton said that would be okay. I was the only boy in a whole classroom of 20, 25, middle-aged women public school teachers. But I had a glorious time, and I made marionettes. These were elaborate marionettes. They were 2.5 feet tall, the strings, movable mouths, and I had a wonderful time. And after that experience, after the first year, I did a summer picnic off the back of a truck, summer puppet show off the back of a truck for the Aluminum Company of Canada. And at Christmas, I made $25 by giving a show to the Naval Reserve and their families. Next summer, I went back and made more puppets, and then I ended up in high school when I was in grade 11. I can't believe the ambition I had. I ended up teaching my classmates how to make puppets, and we made the entire cast of Hamlet, which was the play we were studying that year. We peopled that. We made the dramatis personae of Hamlet. My teacher, Miss Elliott, made Hamlet. She wanted Hamlet for herself, and all the rest of us made the rest of the character. And we performed Hamlet as a marionette show. Can you imagine?
Well, Hamlet is super interesting because that was the first time, kind of the really early modern ideas about digging into a person's psyche.
Existential,
and of course,
it was very
1600s,
contemporary play. I think that's why it continues to have a hold on people.
Yes, yeah.
Probably.
And so not only were you making things with your hands and teaching at that time, but you also dabbled in performance, right? So there was a combination of literature, the play itself.
I love that. Though I was always very shy, and I felt secure behind the material screen of the puppet theater. You know, the people could look at the puppets, but they couldn't see me, which is a good thing.
Ideal, yes.
I thought it was ideal, and so I ended up in high school painting scenery, but not being in plays, that kind of thing. I had a horror of forgetting my lines, which I would have probably. So I enjoyed being behind the scenes and helping to make things happen. That was almost as good for me as doing things myself. I think it partly explains why I was so easily siphoned into this purgatorial life of writing art criticism, which is a secondary life, no matter how you cut it, writing about other people's achievements. I mean, it's only now in advanced late age that I have regarded that as a terrible waste and spent a great deal of my time, all my time, doing only primary things of my own.
Thank you for saying that. I think many of us don't feel that it was a waste because you contributed so much and
I helped
so
a lot of
many
other people with their burgeoning careers,
yes.
but I now feel that I could have at the same time been doing my own work, which is what I think I should have been doing. I always felt I was writing about people that I knew weren't any better than I was. But, well, first of all, I mean, it was an awkward situation. I was getting paid for it. And like somebody who's taking heroin or something, I got quite involved in the need for that weekly paycheck. And I wrote for the Globe and Mail for 14 years. But I know I began this much earlier. I began in 1965. There was an exhibition by a young, sort of exuberant young man named John McGregor. He was no longer with us, unfortunately, at the Isaacs Gallery, famous gallery in Toronto. And John and I were friends. I don't know how we met, but we were friends. And we were walking up Yonge Street, and John had a bundle of drawings under his arm. He said, "I'm going in to see Av Isaacs. He's going to give me a show." I said, sure, John, right. And so John went in. 10 minutes later, he came out with this big beam on his smile. He said, "Av gave me a show." I couldn't believe it. Anyway, at the opening of John's show, a great tall gangly woman named Anne Brodsky, who was the editor then of Canadian Arts Canada, it was called Arts Canada magazine. She's a big tall woman. She was gigantic. Everybody looked up to her in the physical anatomical sense. She said out loud to 300 assembled people, "Would anyone here like to write about this show for my magazine?" So like an idiot, I put my hand up, and so I ended up writing the very first review about John McGregor for Arts Canada.
Do you think that would ever happen today?
Probably not. Probably just as well. Anyway, that sent me down this sort of purgatorial road to writing about other people's art. And, you know, I felt that I wrote well. It was kind of writing, but it wasn't primary. I prided myself in writing as well as I could for my own selfish reasons, not just to honor the achievement of the artist that I was writing about. It did people a lot of good. It did me a lot of good, I guess. But I got old doing it, and I was making things in a tentative way on the side, you know, on my own time. And I don't think it's a very good idea to try to either write or paint or any other creative thing tentatively. I think one can't do things tentatively. Mm-hmm. Then you become an automatic dilettante, a Sunday painter.
Mm-hmm. I don't think you're tentative these days.
No, I'm not.
I'm in
not
your
living
room here, and we're surrounded by work. I'd like to just bring up the notebooks, and so we went from his extreme past to current.
Now after so much pseudo self-sacrifice, I now feel that I'm just wallowing, indulging myself in my own work and my own time in my own way, and it's lovely, and I can't stop doing it. Now it's a greater obsession in writing about other people was. I mean, nobody's paying me for this, but I feel like a lot of artists who mean what they say. I feel terrible if I miss a day.
It's vital.
Yeah, vital
to your life.
Yeah, it makes me unhappy if I don't paint a couple of pages in notebooks or make a small picture or write something. I write all the time too.
Well, I'd like to draw a connection between the commitment and the discipline of writing, let's say, even if it is about others, and the practice of writing
It's true.
as
They're
a
doing it all the
technical.
time. Writing a column every week, twice a week for a number of
You
years.
have to be firing on all cylinders, if you will.
But I wouldn't call it. I mean, it dignifies it to call it a discipline. It wasn't. I was, flogging myself to do this. I mean, it was. If I didn't do it, my column didn't appear. First of all, I didn't get paid. That's the cheap version of all this. But in a larger sense of pride in what one does. I mean, if I didn't write the column, it didn't appear. So I had enough of narcissism. I didn't want that to happen. I wanted to always be there. So I wrote my brains out. And while I was writing this weekly stuff for the Globe, I was also writing a lot of art gallery catalogs for people and that sort of thing. So I wrote millions of words in the service of Canadian art.
Do you consider that work creative?
I consider it semi-creative.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, a sentence is a sentence, and you either write a sentence as well as you can, or you are content to leave it shoddy and needful. I wrote as well as I could. In that sense, I think I honed some skill as a writer at saying what I meant. That's a pleasant skill. To find le mot juste, the right word for everything. That's enjoyable. But it still exists in the secondary realm of making.
What about research? Was it research?
I don't remember thinking of myself as doing a lot of research because it was very one-to-one. I'd go to a gallery and I'd see 3 shows in a single day, and I'd write. My column consists of reviews of 3 different galleries, and I'd see the stuff. I'd make sensuous notes in my notebooks. Lots of red in the upper corner. That sort of thing. There wasn't any point in writing for a newspaper, which is supposed to be accessible to the general public, to get all starchy and theoretical.
Mm-hmm.
I had a chance when I wrote art gallery catalogs to be as theoretical and philosophical as I wanted, which was a great pleasure. But in the newspaper world, it was just best to say what you had to. It's like D.H. Lawrence saying, "Say what you have to say and say it hot."
Right. Writing for popular consumption versus academic or
for the cottage
disciplinary.
That's right.
It's very different, but there's an importance to it. I think the popular stuff. I personally value it and valued your work over the years very much. But I don't want to dwell on that because we are in the present, and but I do think it's interesting. Yes. To be there. I mean, there was thinking and doing and making and painting always. And in addition to the visual arts, you also taught in more than one architectural school.
I always taught. I taught all my life because I had to financially, and I enjoyed teaching too. I enjoyed it a lot. I was born into high school teaching. I taught for a couple of years after my BA, and I thought I'd be teaching forever. And then I decided to go back to university, get an MA. At that point, I was content. I had resigned myself to going back and teaching at high school yet again. They were expecting me. When I got a job at the newly formed University of Guelph, which had been an agricultural college, and now is a full-fledged university. I was on the first year of the staff of the University of Guelph. So
in which department?
Sorry?
In which
in the Department of English,
right.
English literature. And so I was there for 2 years, very enjoyable. And then I thought, well, I can see myself, I can see my future as a professor of English literature, he said in a rather starchy manner. So I'll go get a PhD. So I went to get a PhD at U of T. And I got halfway through this PhD, but it was very weak of me in a way. All the people I knew, they were not teachers and writers. They were artists and painters and sculptors. And they were my friends, and I hung out with them. I wrote about them. I started to write about them in Canadian Arts Canada, and then Canadian Art Magazine, and other places. And I got weaned away from my original purpose. So I left the program, which was really a stupid thing to do.
Pragmatically, it wasn't.
It didn't seem to be. There didn't seem to be much else to do at the time, but I regret it now. However, had I got the PhD and become a member of a faculty, I know perfectly well, knowing what I do about having taught at universities to the extent that I have, I know perfectly well I would have been miserable bureaucratically engaged in this sludge of
nothing comes for free. There's always a sacrifice.
I really wouldn't have been able to stand it. And even when at the university level, when I was teaching, things were already changing. They weren't as bad as they are today when people don't teach Milton, they teach, gender politics and stuff. I mean, there was a shift going on even when I was there. I couldn't have stood it, correctly.
Mm-hmm. And architecture. So, where did your passion for the study of architecture, and obviously not the practice of architecture, was it through travel? Was it through any specific architecture?
No, when I was writing a lot about the visual arts, I inevitably I ended up reading a lot of art criticism. I began to find it predictable and sort of tawdry and not intellectually very stimulating. But what I did find was that the writing that was coming out of the architectural presses was really hot, really lovely. I loved reading intelligent critics writing about architects. I loved that. And so I thought, this is for me, I started to write about projects like that. I don't know how I insinuated myself into the good graces of the U of T School of Architecture, but I'd written a lot, I guess, about structure, about building. I started to give a few guest lectures. Sometimes a good, well-placed guest lecture will get you welcomed into some teaching position. They knew and I knew that I could not teach architecture per se. I wasn't qualified to do that. But what I did do at U of T and later at the University of Waterloo was to give courses to architecture students which were about adjacent and relevant things: history of painting, writing, philosophy, who was Marcel Duchamp. It was important to me that architecture students know that. They had a good time and I had a good time. It was like a soundtrack, kind of a literary soundtrack that ran alongside their practice, their daily practice at the drawing boards, which I didn't participate in, of course. So I was always very grateful. It was a summer course. I only taught in the summer. I gave a 12-week lecture course every summer for 9 years. And I greatly enjoyed doing it, and they seemed to greatly enjoy having these classes. And my faithful wife went to every damn lecture. Can you imagine? She and we had a good time.
She's your biggest fan, maybe.
Yeah, I guess so. It was, as you mentioned earlier, financially ruinous, but that wasn't really the point. I mean, the point was I so much enjoyed doing it. I look forward to every summer. It was great.
Yeah.
I showed bits of film. I should probably be, in jail for showing films illegally or something. How you're supposed to get this $250,000 fine by showing a video, to anything other than a home audience. Maybe I was, on the wrong side of the law somehow. But I used to show snippets from things, things that had an architectural bearing. For example, we had a great time showing films by Jacques Tati, like Mon Oncle. Which is about the horrifying contrast between modern Paris and traditional Paris, and the absurdity, some absurdity of contemporary architecture. It was making fun of things like that, and we had great time. Charlie Chaplin's Modern Times, for example, we had wonderful discussions about it. I would show an excerpt. I wouldn't show a whole film. I would show hunks of it, and we'd have great times.
Well, those are films where the architecture becomes like a character,
sure,
or relevant to the plot.
In the belly of an architect. I mean, we one of the most delightful times we had was when we talked about. I showed the whole film of The Fountainhead, and we talked about Ayn Rand's fascistic novel about a very much Frank Lloyd Wright type character.
Did you find the students seduced by those ideas, or highly critical?
Oh no, I found them. They were the greatest fans in the world. They just ate the stuff. They just sucked it up like a milkshake. I mean, they loved it, and because it was they were full of ideas, corny or misapprehended or distorted. They were ideas that touched on architecture in ways that meant what they did was going to have ramifications for a society at large. And that was so much fun. And I never sort of drove this home or anything. We just had a lovely time.
Before we started the video, we were talking about functionality and what sometimes, like, for example, this beautiful piano in your living room. And you mentioned that you don't play and your wife doesn't play.
I go around and play a little,
but beauty for beauty's sake.
Unschooled jazz, I would say. But basically, I'll tell you the truth. It's just a utilitarian solution to this problem. We bought this house. We bought it from really nice people. Indeed, the woman, the wife of the man, was a fan of my writing and had collected all my columns. So
Oh.
it really lovely. And we liked the house so much, and we bought some of the furniture. The house belonged to the man's father, and he was a choir master, music teacher. The house was full of things. Some of the things he took with him, but some of the things we bought. And they said, do you want the piano? Because it would have cost them more to take it to Toronto.
Yes.
So they sold it to us for a very little amount of money. And we had aspirations about learning to play, but basically, it's just...
Well, others can play it when they visit.
Yeah, others play. Yeah, that's right. I did a lot of... it's another aspect of my career about which nobody knows anything, but I did a lot of libretto writing and lyric writing with, especially with a man named Gene Denovi. And Gene has played this piano, and
Lovely.
after telling me it needed tuning, we had a good time working here sometimes.
And I mean, just as on a personal note, you were the inspiration for me to write music to Walt Whitman.
Oh,
so
your Walt Whitman project, yeah.
You have tentacles that
Very good
reach
project.
out.
Yeah. You never know where something's going to go, do you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's the excitement, right?
Mm. Can be, yeah.
The practice of painting every day is, I know, vital and important to you.
Essential.
It is like food.
Yes.
And air.
Yes.
Do you find that the work in these beautiful books that you've created are works of art on their own, or are they notes, or are they sketches for bigger work that may never be realized?
Well, you're being provocative because it's going to be intellectually flabby of me to say something like, "Oh, Dimitri, they're all three." But in fact, listen, I think that each stroke I put on a page is an inestimable work of genius, and therefore each page is a painting for me. But that's not to say that there are not some pages that strike me as, I think, God, that would be a lovely painting, 8 feet by 8 feet. The chances of my making that are remote, but the thought is there. And then sometimes they are notes. There are pages where I've written poems in trial, phrases I like that aren't going anywhere, annotations. So because the book is Freedom House, it's nobody's business but mine. Nobody's presumably going to see it. And the books, there are over 50 of them now.
Well, I saw...
Actually, I did have an exhibition, or a couple of exhibitions, where the notebooks were there.
Yes.
Yeah, the one that you helped arrange for me, I think.
In Workworth, Ontario.
And then one at a little gallery called the Verb Gallery in Kingston.
That's right. I remember reading about that.
But when I was doing them, I never did them with any thought that anybody would be looking at these things. They were really personal.
But that makes
like
them
a diary,
fresh.
like a journal.
That makes them very fresh. When I just sat down earlier today and flipped through a few pages, there is a quality about them that is direct. That isn't. I think you said that you don't overthink.
They're not studied. No, they're
no.
They're and like lots of painters. It's like William Carlos Williams, the poet, who once wrote a book called "I Wanted to Write a Poem." I mean, the feeling comes over me. I want to make a painting. I go upstairs, I open a journal, a blank page, and I want to make a painting. So I dip a brush in a pigment, I make a mark, and I think now a painting has begun, and then I'll sort of see where that goes. I do not say to myself, I'm going to paint something today that is relevant to Nancy Pelosi's retirement from the American Senate. I mean, I just don't have a program. But a program develops.
Yes. And the programming or the data that goes into your brain to create this has been a lifelong journey. I mean, all of those interviews, all of the books that one reads, all of the pictures that one looks at are stored magically in this brain, right?
Well, that's a very attractive suggestion, actually. I never thought it was that deliberate, but obviously it's true. A man is a part of all that he has been, to misquote Tennyson, I think. But but it's true that everything dumps into the hopper, and you can't tell what's going to happen. But in the drawing, in the books, in the notebooks, I mean, something will start to arrive, and I don't mean to talk surrealistically. It isn't kind of mystic vision or anything. Just if something comes up and surprises you, and you think, that looks like a dog I saw last week.
Yes.
It's not a program.
Or quotidian, daily expressions, and then the journal aspect, the journaling is part of it, which is quite
like
beautiful.
A diary or journal, yeah.
Yeah, so it's writing, but it's painting, or it's painting, but it's writing.
And because I faithfully date everything and inscribe something, it's a selfish but pleasurable way to see where I've been, that I've been alive.
Mm-hmm. I have a beautiful little painting of yours that we bought many years ago, before we actually met, and it's called On the Tops of Trees. I remember Tops of Trees, and it's a painting of trees, urban trees, with some Victorian architecture, and it's inscribed with the title. The title is written, in a beautiful script. You have a beautiful handwriting style, and it's part of the clouds, I believe, and it looks it's part of the atmosphere.
Yeah,
it collapses all into one image.
Well, it's funny where the act of painting and the act of writing meld. I don't think I've ever made a picture in which I didn't write something. I annotate everything. It can be as simple as a date, but it can also be more, and often is more. Words, suggestions, promises to myself. But I've written on everything.
There are a few artists that we can probably think about who have used text in their work in contemporary or modern period.
The late
but
John Scott, with whom I was very close.
Yes.
We had a long 50-year friendship. John started writing on his pictures because of my suggestion.
That's very nice.
Do that.
Connection. Yeah.
He wrote on everything as well, all his life.
Yes, I'm a big fan of his work as well. The Trans Am at the National Gallery is...
That's a brilliant piece, yeah. There's a melding of object and text.
Exactly.
John was recruiting all of us who could put up with it. I lasted about 15 minutes trying to scrape words from the Book of Revelation into the paint. He painted the whole car with thick black paint, and then the idea was to scrape with it all.
I didn't realize it was a collaborative exercise. Was it a collaborative project in a way?
Oh, it took like 35 people. I mean, everybody got tired after 10 minutes.
I had no idea.
Oh, yeah. We had to transcribe the entire Book of Revelation on this damn car.
Do you remember which part you read?
Well, we described the whole, which part? I didn't know. I can't remember. I remember it being exhausting, and people would just say, John, I can't do this anymore. And then somebody else would take over.
That's lovely. It's community engagement. It's very contemporary.
Very engaged, yes. Deeply, in a bodily sense, yes.
Yes. Well, and this is, you mentioned the body, and we all age, we all...
No kidding, yeah.
Our bodies change, our minds
yeah, thank you for reminding me of that.
Sorry. but in a good way, I think.
You think?
I mean, well, yeah, I do. I think...
That means you don't have a lot of time.
I'm attracted to come and be in your company, in your space, near your body, rather than talk on the phone or email, as we have been for a number of years now, and the pandemic played a role in that, of course. But this is very special for me personally, I have to say. To me, you are a polymath, or you are somebody that I admire, because I kind of get the impulse to absorb and to learn and to not limit one's brain.
Maybe that's the penchant for teaching. The whole concept of the polymath is a charming and dangerous one, because it's sort of it swoops down asymptotically close to dilettante.
Yes.
And, being good at all sorts of things can sometimes mean not really being stellar in anything. So on the other hand, we're back to that cliche about not having any choice. I mean, I could not give up writing, and I could not give up painting, and I can't give up lots of the things I love. So I do them. I mean, it seems to me unrealistic to give up something you really love. And I don't worry about whether the one art is moving ahead of the other or anything like that. I mean, I just do the best I can every day to amuse myself and to enjoy myself. You know, if something goes wrong, you know, I just cover it over. I mean, these books they're palimpsests. The pages are covered over with other things, and when that thing doesn't work, I brush white all over it and do something on top of it. I mean, nothing. I've never let anything fail. I've never let anything go bad. I just insist on pulling it out. You know, I'm going to save it, no matter how awful it is. I don't remember ever throwing something in the garbage. I fix it. I studied with Marshall McLuhan about 75 years ago. He used to have this saying, which used to annoy me all the time. He would say, the Balinese say, and I used to keep thinking, who the fuck are the Balinese? I mean, they're not just the people who live in Bali. They apparently the word Balinese meant exotic, unknowable people from another culture. And he would say, the Balinese have a saying, we have no art, we just do everything as well as we can. And I sort of admire that.
Yes.
As soon as you start drawing these distinctions, I mean, how do I know when I'm doing something in a notebook and Margetta calls me to come down and have some dinner? I mean, how am I gonna say to myself, well, now I have to give up the art experience and go and deal with my bodily needs or something? That's silly, right? I mean, it's all some sort of continuum, and I don't. And as you said earlier, you never know when something is going to feed into something else. So everything is precious, and I don't like those distinctions between art and life. Is everything art? Yeah, probably, but no more so than how everything is life.
Yes.
I mean, they're just you can't detach them.
But the word palimpsest comes. You brought it up earlier. Comes to mind that layering history, personal histories. You know, there are no regrets. This is the artifact. You know, your life's work is, and the journaling.
I guess so, but Dimitri, I have lots of regrets. I mean, I also such regrets about time wasted, stupid things said, things imperfectly written, things that I promised to do well and didn't do well. I mean, a couple of times in my life, I just didn't finish something I was told people I would do. I mean, I have felt terrible about that for years. I mean, you know, lots of people do that, but I felt awful about it.
You're hard on yourself. You're hard on yourself.
Well, because I just think it's immoral to, to set yourself. You're going to write an essay for somebody, and they're expecting it, and then you don't do it. I mean, I think it's a terrible, sinister, deadly thing to do. I mean, one has a sort of sense of. I hate to use a moldy word like integrity, but you know, integrity, it really means it means oneness, right? Being integrated,
right.
I mean, being one thing.
Not fragmented.
I mean, being a whole thing. And I think it's sort of important to be a whole thing. Otherwise, we start coming apart, and I don't want to come apart before my time.
Do you think technology contributes to us coming apart?
I think it alienates us dreadfully. I'm grateful for email. But I don't use a computer in a very sophisticated way. I just use it as a kind of a quiet typewriter. And other kinds of technology, I'm just hopeless at. I can't fix my own car. When the gas stove wasn't working, we had to get a technician to come. I can't fix anything. I don't understand technological things. I appreciate them. I enjoy them. I love looking at your sophisticated recording equipment here, but I couldn't have any personal part in it.
No interest. Really?
Interest, yes, but ability, no.
Ability, no. Well, I
But see, you're an architect, and you're easy with details and exactitude, and I'm muzzy and imprecise.
You have no idea. You have no idea.
I'm imprecise about exactitude and detailing and so on.
There are many of us who practice architecture who prefer to design by tossing a stone to indicate where a wall begins or ends.
I'm glad. It's refreshing to hear that.
I think as I age, this is becoming more and more true that the.
Well, you know, it does seem to be a strange thing that as people age, they tend toward the abstract, and you see it in every artist's career. There is, both painters and sculptors and writers, architects, but as they get older, they have fewer masters to pay homage to. and they throw themselves back on delicious things like their impulses and their innate feelings about things. In this week's art post, every week I publish in an online journal called the Monday Art Post, which comes out of a gallery in Toronto run by a lovely, literate, ex-Hong Kong couple of photographers. Been doing it for 12, 15 years, I think. Every week I do something called a poem a week, and this week I thought I would, just for fun, put in it, it comes out in a couple of days, comes out Monday, next few days, a poem that was published in the Literary Review of Canada in 2001.
Of yours?
Yeah, and normally it's a poem I've just written, you know, and I
Why
thought,
did you choose that one?
well, I liked it. I mean, it turned up. I was trying to make some half-hearted attempt to clean up my studio, and it turned up like a cork bobbing in the water. And I thought, yeah, this is a pretty nice poem. So I sent it to them, and they're going to publish it in the Art Post. I gave a copy to Margetta, and she wrote back saying, it's a very nice poem, but my goodness, you don't write like that anymore. And I can see that that's true, and that must be true with everything we do. The way you design, the way you build, the way I paint, everything changes, but you don't notice. But the slide is never toward more exactitude or niggardly precision. It's always toward approximation, abstraction, taking a chance, throwing the dice. It's about letting things happen more and more. I guess it's because we can't control our bodies much anymore. At 83, I let things happen.
Yeah.
I mean, things are going to happen. I have to let them. Yeah. What can I do about it? And making art is just like that.
Do you think as we age, as artists, we live more interior lives?
It's funny you should say that, because the late David Bolduc, who was a great friend of mine, God, I miss him still. He died in 2010. Near the end of his life, he died of a brain tumor, unfortunately, and it was very bad. But before he got really sick, he had a very successful show in Toronto at the Christopher Cutts Gallery. I wrote about it in the paper, but I wrote a catalog essay for him too. And the title of this essay was a quote from David. It was called Towards a More Interior Life. And he was determined at that age, alas, he never got the chance, to become less concerned about what was going on out there, what was in the latest issue of Art Forum. Who cared? He wanted to sort of march to his own drummer, and it resulted in the best paintings of his career, I thought. I think we all do that. I think we end up, whether it's resignation or a real decision, I think we end up saying, let's just do what we feel like.
Yeah, and don't you think audiences expect that a little bit? They want to know David. They want to know Gary.
You think so?
I think so. I think
you're more generous than I am. I'm much more cynical than you are about that.
Perhaps.
I don't think they
give me a couple more years.
I don't think they care. I think sometimes they're pleased by pleasing artifacts, but I don't think they care how the artist.
Well, I don't think it's a conscious thing that audiences do, but
no, well,
you can't pander to the audience.
God, no. In fact, with a certain dollop of good health, you can learn to despise them.
It's a complicated relationship, isn't it?
Yeah, not so much for me. He says, I don't give a crap much. I would have cared more 25, 30 years ago, maybe.
40 also comes with age, right?
I mean, I have nobody to please anymore.
Yes.
I'm not trying to maintain an academic position. Yeah. I'm not worried about getting fired from anything. I mean, I have nobody to please except my wife.
It's kind of a freedom.
Great freedom, enormous freedom. Yeah. It's one of the few gifts that people give old people.
Yes. I mean, it's kind of ironic because as time shrinks,
and the
body shrinks, and our faculties, we're like the dandelion, when it ripens and it floats away.
But it's a really cruel bodily evolutionary plan. I did a book with Kissing, the man who publishes the Art Post. I did a book of 100 of his photographs and 100 of my haiku.
I remember that. Yeah.
You do?
Yes.
It's a print.
I'm on your mailing list.
It's print-on-demand books, and nobody sees it. He's done some wonderful books of mine. Nobody sees them. I'm very proud of them, but they're hard to find because they're print-on-demand.
How big an audience do you think we need?
Need?
Yeah. I mean, need versus want, I guess.
Oh, I don't know. The romantic cliche, which I refuse to buy into, is, oh, I just need one person. Bullshit. That's ridiculous. Either nobody, and they can all go fuck themselves, or like the whole world. I mean, I like the same audience as Julian Schnabel has. I mean, I ain't going to get it, but I hate this stupid romantic thing about it's okay, neglect me. I don't need anybody, just one person. That's nonsense. I mean, I like to meet I like to touch as many people as I could.
Yeah. Speaking of Julian Schnabel, he's both a filmmaker and a painter, and probably does other things too. Yeah. Do you think his films are better than his paintings?
No, I think they're both excellent.
Okay.
It's not a very how shall I put it? It's not a very comfortable attitude to have. It's more usual to sort of have these savage put downs of Schnabel for being belligerent, egotistical, and all that. But I think Schnabel is gorgeous, delightful. I love his swaggering and his bravado and his tastelessness, and the films are great too. And I thought it was richly wonderful when he made that first film about Jean-Michel Basquiat, and everybody said, "Oh well, this is going to be a disaster because the guy's a painter; he can't make films." The film was wonderful.
It is,
and they got better all the time. There's no reason. It's such a boring middle class idea that because somebody's good at this, they can't be good at that. That's just horseshit.
But it's kind of human nature to want to quantify.
Sure, because people just hate other people's being swaggering with
more than one
ambition and stuff.
Yeah.
It's about not knowing your place.
Yeah.
The last thing I want in the world is to know my place.
Yes.
That would really be discouraging.
Or seek permission to do something.
Oh, no, please, no permissions, no. Never.
When did you learn that lesson?
Along the way. Oh, God. No, it was, I would never whine about this, but it wasn't a very easy life. I mean, first my father leaves, and then my mother marries a man I can't stand, who had been an alcoholic and who, much to his credit, got over alcoholism only promptly to wade right into the depths of barbiturate addiction. And so he, in the course of the next 10 years, he wrecked our car, he burned our house down, and eventually killed himself. Mm-hmm. And then I married my first wife. We had, a year after we were married, we had a retarded child who's now like 60. Mm-hmm. Then we had a baby who died. Mm-hmm. I mean, really, it was enough stuff to ruin a half dozen marriages.
I didn't know that.
And so I just feel that, one survives the best way one can. Mm-hmm. And in terms of seeking permission, I don't seek permission from anybody to do anything anymore because all the advice I ever got was bad. Mm-hmm. In fact, it's like the cliche of it's like a line from Seinfeld or something. Somebody says this, be sure you do that instead. Do the opposite, you'll be okay.
So remember the puppeteer teacher who you took lessons from? There must have been a few professors or teachers that you respected? Are there many or a couple?
I don't know how to quantify it, but sure, there were lots of
them.
Oh, sure, there were wonderful people I admired.
You mentioned Marshall McLuhan. Did you actually take a course?
Yeah, I was a member of the so-called Center for Culture and Technology.
Yes.
Marshall had this old gray-haired secretary. She was wonderful. I love to hear her. The phone would ring. She'd pick up the phone and she'd say, "Culture and technology here," as if there wasn't any place else. Right?
Did she have a British accent or something?
Oh, I think she did. I certainly hope so. No, listen. I had great academic friends. I got to know and soon became almost the adopted son of a wonderful man named Barker Fairley, who for years and years was a professor of German literature at the University of Toronto. He wrote the best book ever there was about Goethe, his great specialty. It was called The Study of Goethe. Mm-hmm. Came out in 1947. There's a letter in the Toronto Rare Books Library from Thomas Mann to Barker saying, it embarrasses me to say that it's taken an Englishman to write the best book about our great writer. Uh-huh. But Anyway, Barker was a great friend of and supporter of the group of 7 painters. He used to go on excursions with them. He watched them paint, but he didn't paint himself. He didn't feel that was his role. Then late in life, he started to paint himself. So one day, when he was 85, I went to see him thinking, I'll go and see what this old man paints. He probably paints these delightful Sunday painter things, and
Winston Churchill.
Yeah. And I was astonished. These pictures were lean, reduced, Spartan. They were like paintings by Milton Avery or something. I was so transfixed by them. I wrote an article right away. It was in the Toronto Star then. It was before the Globe, before I was writing for the Globe. And then I wrote a cover story in the Canadian Forum about him. We became friends. At the age of 85, we became friends, and we had a 15-year friendship until he died just a week short of his 100th birthday.
Wow.
We were friends for 15 years, beginning when he was 85.
Well, that's a very rich.
It was wonderful. Yeah, it was
yes.
wonderful. And through him, I got to know Northrop Frye, whom I very much admired. Northrop Frye was one of my PhD thesis supervisors.
Wow.
And
didn't he also teach Margaret Atwood? He also taught Margaret Atwood.
well, maybe. I don't know. I've lost
others.
track of Margaret Atwood. She has 2 Booker Awards. I've always thought to myself, she can use them as 2 Booker ends for
bookends.
2 Booker ends for her novels. I never could
I see a
read.
painting, or I see a notebook sketch with 2 Booker.
Yeah, although I'm not a cartoonist, So.
No.
So there were lots of people. Marshall McLuhan. I had a very sad time with Marshall McLuhan because I had looked forward to teaching, to being with Marshall McLuhan. When I was teaching high school, for the next 2-year period, I treaded water teaching high school for 2 years, knowing I was going to return at the end of 2 years to graduate school to do, and I was greatly looking forward to this, and so much so that I used to keep a copy of the Gutenberg Galaxy open in my desk drawer, and when classes would circulate between, I'd open the drawer and just look at it and think, a month and a half, and when I got there, I was overjoyed to be in the McLuhan seminar. But he was ill. He was growing his brain tumor, and he was very erratic and very peculiar. I remember once on the eve of the PhD general exams, I said to Marshall that I was very nervous. I couldn't remember anything, and this sounds ridiculous, but it took an hour for me to back across the room with him slowly advancing, poking me in the chest with his finger, saying, "You've got to ask for strength from the kingdom of heaven." I kept thinking, oh yeah, right, get me out of here. And
the sentiment,
he just wasn't well. It took an
It wasn't
hour.
well, but he believed in you. He believed in you.
I know, but he also believed in the kingdom of heaven to help me through the PhD generals, and I thought God had more important things to do, probably.
Well, maybe his heaven was a nice place.
Well, you're being very sweet, but the fact is, he was having difficult times.
I understand it. But
And that was the year he wrote his book called Through the Vanishing Point, which was about the visual arts, about which I'm sorry to say Marshall McLuhan knew nothing.
No, I read that as well
No,
a long time ago, and I just thought
He didn't know anything about the visual arts. He never should have attempted such a thing.